Today, the world spins on the back of one single company. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta. They are all standing in line, literally begging to buy this company's product. Its value has crossed $3 trillion. That's more than the entire GDP of Russia, Canada, or South Korea. But this company doesn't sell oil. It doesn't mine gold. It's not a bank. This company makes graphics cards for video games. But here is the real paradox. The man who is the king of AI today was sitting in a small room 30 years ago with his head in his hands. He was just 30 days away from total bankruptcy. The company was out of money, their product was terrible, and competitors were ready to crush him. He had to choose between two options: give up or make the biggest gamble in tech history. He gambled, and in this video, we will decode the blueprint of that gamble. This is the story of how a toy maker became the new god of the world. But before we start, hit that like and subscribe button so we can continue with full power. (1996), Silicon Valley. Nvidia was a nobody startup. Jensen Huang and his team dreamed of bringing 3D graphics to video games. They had signed a contract with the giant of that era, SEGA, to build the chip for their next console. Everything looked good, until disaster struck. Nvidia's engineers realized the technology they bet on, quadrilaterals, was wrong. Microsoft introduced a new standard, and Nvidia was swimming in the opposite direction. Jensen Huang faced a hair-raising truth. If they finished the SEGA project, they would deliver an obsolete product and fail. If they stopped, the contract would be voided, and since they had no money, they would go bankrupt. They were trapped in the valley of death. The company only had enough cash for 30 days of payroll. This is where Jensen did something they don't teach you in business school. He went to the CEO of SEGA and said, "We have failed. Our architecture is wrong, and we can't build your console." But then he said something that came from pure audacity or genius. "But if you don't pay us the full contract money, we will go bankrupt. Please pay us so we can become your competitor." It was an insane request. Why would SEGA pay a failure? Miraculously, the CEO of SEGA agreed. That money was the last drop of blood Nvidia needed. Jensen gathered his engineers and said, "We have one shot. We have to build a chip no one has ever seen." They built the Riva 128. It blew up the market just 4 months later. Nvidia was saved. But this isn't the end of the story. This was just the warm-up. In 2006, when Nvidia was the king of PC gaming and making huge profits, Jensen decided to risk everything again. He had a strange vision. A graphics card shouldn't just be for gaming. It should be able to do math. He introduced the CUDA platform. Wall Street screamed, "Why are you spending company profits to build supercomputers for gamer kids? Nobody needs this." Nvidia's stock crashed, profits dropped by 80%. Any other CEO would have retreated, just like Google's managers did with Stadia. But Jensen Huang, he put on his leather jacket and said, "We keep going, even if it takes 10 years. He didn't know he was building the foundation for something that 20 years later would eat the world. 2012. A few mad scientists in Toronto realized something. They found out that to train neural networks, AI, standard Intel processors were useless. They needed something that could do thousands of calculations at once. And suddenly, they discovered CUDA. What Jensen Huang planted 10 years ago was now ready for harvest. Suddenly, everything changed. OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Tesla. Everyone realized that to build the future, they needed Nvidia chips. The gamble that made shareholders angry had turned into the only lifeline for technology. Today, Nvidia's H100 chips are more valuable than gold. Companies that once mocked Nvidia are now on waiting lists to buy them. Jensen Huang proved Wall Street wrong. He didn't see the future. He built it. The Nvidia story isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a story of enduring pain. Jensen Huang has a famous quote he told Stanford students, "I wish upon you amply doses of suffering," because he believes the character of an empire is formed at the edge of the cliff. Nvidia succeeded because it was willing to bet on a market that didn't exist yet, and was willing to endure 10 years of humiliation and loss for it. Unlike Google, who folded Stadia at the first sign of loss, Nvidia stayed in the pain. And this brings us to today's Empire Law. Empire Law number 6, vision without suffering is just a hallucination. If you want to build an empire, you must be willing to look like an idiot for years, until the day you suddenly become a genius. But what do you think? Will Nvidia stay at the top or crash like Cisco and Intel? If you enjoyed these architect stories, like and subscribe, because in the next video, we step out of the light and into the shadow empire. Nvidia is the king of tech, but there is a truth that is terrifying. There is one company that owns Nvidia, and not just Nvidia. They are the top shareholders of Apple, Microsoft, Google, and even their competitors. They control $10 trillion of the world's wealth with a secret AI called Aladdin, the company you don't hear about on the news, but owns everything you buy. The story of a man who went from being fired on Wall Street to becoming the owner of the world.